Chicago Bears traveling to Vegas to take on the Las Vegas Raiders. Walt was talking about this one a little bit earlier in the show. I think he was saying that he grew up just in Illinois watching the Bears, and now he's a Raiders fan. So this is a tough game for our guy Walt in the chat. Wondering what he thinks about this one. Well, he keeps saying the phrase "lowly Raiders," so I think that he is going to say that the Bears are going to win this one. But what do you think? Which side of the ball you want to talk about first, Dalton?
All right, I want to see week to week because we got a lot more of it last week against Dallas, and I know Dallas is bad, but I want to see week to week what Ben Johnson's going to continue to add to this offense. And one thing I'm intrigued with is the Bears going with a lot more motions and shifting in their offensive play calling last week. So the first 2 weeks of the season, I believe they had the fifth lowest motion rate in the NFL. Last week, 76% motions, third highest in the NFL in week 3 on those plays. 7.7 yards per play, 11.4 yards per pass, just outstanding setting up pass plays with the motions and pre-snap formation changing, and a 0.24 EPA per play is fantastic. The Raiders, when they face motion, and Washington last week especially absolutely killed them with motion, when they face a play with motion, they have the lowest coverage grade in the NFL. I want to see how much more Ben Johnson adds to the offense, how much more Caleb Williams can handle, and again, it's going to be progressive on a week-to-week basis. Caleb's going to get a little more and some stuff he hasn't even done before, but I really like the layers to this offense that were added. The trick plays got a lot of the spotlight too against Dallas last week, but when you're talking about motions, two things it can do for you. One is it can tell you what coverage they're in, and two, especially with a team that plays as much zone coverage as a team like the Cowboys last week or the Raiders this week, you can really start to dictate spacing once you find out the habits of those second-level defenders, the linebackers and box safeties that are dropping down and have to react laterally. Even the Commanders, I thought, did a great job against the Raiders of motioning, making linebackers shift and commit towards the motion, and then backside cutting on these runs that they were getting, and the linebackers were then out of position, right? It's a lot of guys who haven't played together before, haven't communicated a lot before, so I think Ben Johnson is going to continue to ratchet up this use of motion and shifting in his offense and really try to control the spacing and the tempo and everything of the Raiders defense, especially in zone coverage.
You know, what I really want to talk about on the Raiders side of things is their lack of run game. But I think that we've talked about that sort of ad nauseum over the last couple of weeks. And the fact of the matter is, like, I just don't know if it gets better, right? It feels as though the people who cover that team and the fans of that team are questioning very loudly what the thought process is with Pete Carroll and his son, who's the offensive line coach, of how they're deploying their offensive linemen, with Jackson Powers-Johnson now at guard and Jordan Meredith has kicked into center, and they sort of just like made that decision during training camp and they stuck with it. There wasn't really a competition there, at least it didn't seem like it. And now Jackson Powers-Johnson is sort of like splitting time with Alex Kappa. Like, it just feels very confusing, especially because the numbers don't back it up, right? I mean, like, the numbers for the Raiders offensive line the previous season were good. That's why this team opted to draft Ashton Genty, overtaking a guy like Armand Membou in the top 10, because I thought that they were pretty good on the offensive line and that group was ascending. This year they switch it up, and very clearly the changes are bad. I mean, we're 3 weeks into it, and this is one of the least effective run blocking units and rushing units in the NFL. So I would love to sit here and talk about how that needs to be a lot better, because it does for the Raiders. But the fact of the matter is I can't just sit here and say, like, well, hopefully it's better this week. And instead I have to take the reality as it is and say, well, I don't think the Raiders are going to be great on the ground. So guess what that means needs to happen, Dalton? Geno Smith's got to be a flamethrower, and he's not afraid to do it. But how does that look against the Chicago Bears? Well, specifically, passes of 15 or more yards this season. In week 1, the Chicago Bears had a 31.7 team coverage grade on such throws. Week 2 was worse. It was a 26.1. But then last week, it was better. It was a 51.1. So it's like, all right, well, okay, we're getting a little bit better here. They're playing a little bit better. Like I said earlier in the show, secondary work is just very up and down anyways. That's just sort of a wave that you have to ride with throughout the season. It kind of just, Dalton, I think that this game entirely depends on which version of the Chicago Bears secondary is showing up in this one. Is it the one for the first 2 weeks? Because if it is, Geno Smith might throw for 350 again. And I think that we might have an absolute shootout. If we get the unit that we saw last week against the Dallas Cowboys, well, then all of a sudden I really favor the Bears to get a win in this game. So that is what it comes down to for me. Again, I would love to talk about the Raiders getting better on the ground game, but what am I going to say? Hey, put Jackson Powers-Johnson back at center where he belonged the whole time. where he played well last year, where he played really well when he was at Oregon. I feel like that's kind of an obvious, but it's not happening right now. So I'm not going to sort of just get into that and say, well, they need to do this if I don't think that it's realistic. I think the Bears win this game. I'll say they win 27-24. It'll be a fun one. And depending on how the Bears secondary plays, I think that's where the over-under really comes into play.
I think you very well could get a high-scoring game. These two teams are two of the bottom 8 coverage teams overall in the NFL. The one big difference for the Bears last week, too, is they actually got a pass rush. They pressured Dak Prescott on 40% of his dropbacks. That was under 25% for the Bears against J.J. McCarthy and Jared Goff the 2 weeks before. So if they can actually get a pass rush going as well, that obviously helps. I think this Raiders team in pass protection is still solid. They're just not run blocking very well. But I have the Bears 28-24. I think similar outcome, and it is going to depend on just, which are we getting last week's more consistent version of Caleb Williams. As long as he's been in a clean pocket, he's been really solid, and I think Ben Johnson adding layers to this offense helps a lot, but we could get a shootout in this game considering the two offenses and the way they can be high-flying at times and the way the secondaries have both really struggled throughout the season so far. I'm with you, though. I'm going to take the Bears. I feel a little better about them and what we saw coming off of last week against Dallas.